You are going to die. Now let's talk about Final Destination with its director and co-writer, James Wong.
We were working on X-Files, Glenn Morgan and I. Our agent basically came to us with this treatment. It was called Flight 180. This is a story that I heard from New Line. Jeffrey Reddick is the person who wrote the first. When we came on board, we only saw the treatment, but apparently Jeffrey had written a script as well. The LA to New York flight was Flight 180. Flight 180, I guess, because 180 is is the opposite of 360, is half a circle. So we thought it was a pretty cool name, but I think Bob Shea thought it was too specific because you couldn't do Flight 182, the sequel. You know what I mean? The premise is the same, which is kids go on this school trip to Paris, in this case, and one of the kids has a premonition and gets off the plane, and then the plane explodes. And then what happens after is that, this death character, or this kind of personified Grim Reaper, comes and kills all the kids that had gotten off the plane. So Glenn and I weren't really, we're going, well, I don't want to do that. That seems just like, I don't know what's new about that. And then we came up with the idea that what if it wasn't a personified, a Grim Reaper? What if death is all around? Death is all around us. Death is not a person or a thing that can be seen or felt or fought against. Death is everywhere. So we started thinking about. We also, when we're doing X-Files, we love the idea. We think the best scares are the kinds that you can sort of run into in your everyday life. So, because we had written in X-Files that Toombs character. I think the first show is called Squeeze. It's about this character who get into really tight places and comes and he eats your liver. And then we thought of the sector. I think this is one of the few X-Files that we did a sequel to, which is the character is named Eugene Toombs, and then the second time he hid under these escalators in this in the machines in the escalators. I remember the actor was at Century City Mall, and the escalators were actually being worked on, so they were opened up, and the kid saw them and said, "You're not going to get me. You're not going to get me." And so we love the idea of running into a situation that a character on a movie would run into. Then that became what we felt were ultimately known as the Final Destination moments, the coincidence or the near misses that people run into, and they go, "Oh my God, that could have been a Final Destination moment." So that's how we kind of aimed the movie to have these kind of fun Rube Goldbergian kind of setups that allows for a surprise and unpredictable death. So when we pitched that to New Line and they agreed to it, that's when we said, okay, well, we'll come on board and do this. That came organically from being kind of a polar opposite of a personified killer. If it was just so, like we have Freddy, you have Jason, you have all these kind of evil guys that were in vogue that was the sort of the mainstay of the horror franchises back then. And we were just thinking, like, what's the most opposite of that? Because we don't want to do that. And the most opposite of it was that there was no one, So I guess in that way, it is an aha moment that, we kind of flipped the story on its head and said, what if there is no one person, So that's how we came up with that, I guess. It was the thing that made it all, ultimately what made Final Destination the movie franchise that it is, that conceit. When we came aboard, we had seen only a treatment, and we pitched our idea for it, and it was probably the fastest. We basically wrote the first draft and turned it in, and they said, let's do it. Of course there were notes after that, but they were on board with doing it immediately. And I think from the time when we said yes to, or when they said yes to our version of what Final Destination ultimately ended up to be, and to the release date, it was probably a year and a half. So, all writing a script, getting into production, getting in post, and release was a year and a half. So it was very quick in terms of for a feature. It was the first time directing a movie, but it was well, what happened was this, I guess. I directed in X-Files. We're on X-Files from the very beginning. And then we had our own show that Glenn and I had our own show called Space Above and Beyond. The third season, and then that show only ran for one season. We had an overall deal at Fox, so they said, we want you to go back to X-Files. And so we talked to Chris, and Chris Carter, who's the creator of X-Files. So what do you guys want, what do you want to do? I mean, is there anything special that you want to do? And it was sort of in that moment in his office, I think I want to direct one. He goes, absolutely. So I got a chance to direct an X-Files. It was called, the episode was called Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. And I was fortunate enough to be honored with a Emmy nomination. So that was the time when Flight 180, when they wanted us to do Flight 180. And that's how I said, all right, if I'm doing that, and I got this Emmy nomination, I'm going to direct the movie. So that's how that came about, from a sort of a impromptu ask by Chris and me just sort of thinking out loud. So it was a very lucky coincidence. And it was the difference really between a TV show and a movie is really the amount of time you get to prepare. And so with a TV show, it's so much harder. You have 8 days to prepare this before your first day of shooting, and then you only shoot for 8 days. So that was the schedule for X-Files. In Final Destination, I got like 3.5 months to prepare to shoot for 58 days. You know what I mean? So in a way, doing the TV show really prepared me. It made me realize sort of how much easier it was to do a feature. You had so much more time to prepare. You should know exactly what you're going to be doing before you step on the set. So doing Final Destination was a lot easier versus the TV show. So I had working on the TV show actually prepared me so much more for the feature than I could have imagined before. Now, granted, there's a lot more money involved. In that way, there's a lot more pressure. But I felt absolutely prepared to do it after I'd done the TV show. The hardest thing is the plane. We had this plane we had the fuselage of the plane. It was a set, obviously. It wasn't an actual plane. But on the biggest, it filled the stage, and on this big giant gimbal that we could move, so that the physics of, when it was in dive, we actually put actors in a 45-degree angle. And we had the stunt people, they actually rolled down the plane, so that it doesn't look fake. It's not wires or anything. It was actual people falling in the right angle. So that was a big to do. And I remember going on set, wow, this is so great. And I brought my daughter. I think my daughter was only 5 years old at the time, my oldest. And we're out there, we see this big machine with this big set on it. We put the actors on. We take the big, there's concrete weighing down the plane, so that weighing the front of it, so that it wouldn't tilt. It would be balanced. Put the actors in, start the motor up for the gimbal to work, and because we had concrete kind of balancing it out, these big giant blocks of concrete, the gimbal, the very first move, it just dipped to its end position and wouldn't move again. So we were going, what the heck? And so that took, another 4 hours to reset, rebalance, put the actors on. Now the thing is moving really well. We did the whole scene, and Devin's basically saying, after he has a premonition, he goes, "Get off the fucking plane! Get off the fucking plane!" So this goes on all afternoon. I didn't really think about it, but my daughter was sitting behind us in the video village watching, what was happening. At the end of the day, I turned to her because I want to show her this big giant armature with this gimbal and all that. I turned to her and said, "So, honey, what did you think about the set?" She goes, "Dad, I love the fucking plane." I said, "Do not tell your mom what you said to me." But that was the biggest, hardest thing to do because it was such a big, giant, Megillah with all these extras and all that stuff to do. Surprisingly, the easiest one is the bus hit. It just happened to be timed out perfectly that we never had to adjust anything really without using any CGI. The editor just spliced in the dummy, the blood gag dummy that we had with Amanda's shot, and it just looked perfect even from the very get-go. The bus hit, after we did it, a lot of people started doing like hits coming up from nowhere, and I believe that a lot of people just kind of took that because it was the most effective. The audience just flipped when they first saw that, and I think people see it a lot now because of Final Destination, particularly like Meet Joe Black. Just I think they pretty much ripped us off, and they elaborated on it by hitting him a bunch of times. But so that kill was something that we thought we needed a big boo that people wouldn't sort of didn't expect it to see, because the airplane sequence was so elaborate in showing the different parts of how people came to demise. The hardest things are probably little things that this things with the fish hook. It's just tedious work to get things to work in a way that they really don't. It doesn't really work. Like in the title sequence, the pages flipping to land on the right page. Those things just took forever. Luckily, we didn't have the whole. We had a second unit crew. We had some other, off the camera, off somewhere else doing that stuff. But those are the things that take a long time. It's the philosophy of it, which was from the mundane, which is like a shower, to some of the bigger ones, which is the train thing. You have to sort of sprinkle your set pieces and your kind of torturous stats, like the kitchen one where the shard of the computer kind of cuts your neck. You think that's it? No, it's going to drag on a little further, no longer. So it's sort of like just thinking about the rhythm of the kills, from the very fastest ones to the things that you can run into in your real life easily, to sort of torturous ones like the knives ultimately penetrating Mrs. Luton. So it was sort of like thinking about the rhythm of the movie that sort of determined the kills for us. What happened in the movie was that when we wrote the script, the ending was actually a much more kind of philosophical, like you can't beat death. So at the end of the movie, we actually had Clear be pregnant. They go visit Alex's grave. She and Kerr Smith, who played Carter, and they have this moment where it's sort of like a kind of a touching moment where they say, well, somehow we couldn't beat death, and the only way to beat death was she was actually pregnant. She was going to bring new life into the world. That's the only way you can beat death. We previewed the movie, and it was astounding that everybody hated the ending. People were not ready. They didn't want to have that kind of closure to this kind of movie. So, basically we came up with, well, they don't want this kind of ending. They're really looking for, when we do Final Destination, the biggest trick of Final Destination really is that, what we learned from the first movie, is that the biggest gag is actually the very beginning of the movie. You have the bus hit, you have the airplane, and the second one you have the freeway crashes, and then the rest of the movie is not going to be as big as that because the first one is the biggest disaster, right? That involves a lot of people. So what we learn is that the audience, in movies, what you leave the theater with is more important than sort of what you came in to see the movie for. I mean, if it's not more important, it's just as important, or I think it is more important. The ending of the movie has to be something that people want to talk about, or people come out of the theater with this kind of this energy that you want to leave them with, and it lets them talk about it, and you can feel the energy change when we're in previews, when you had this kind of philosophical, soft ending. People are just kind of like, oh, and there's a deflation. So the idea was basically we said we can't leave the movie. We can't end the movie like this. We have to end the movie with a bang, with some kind of bang. So that's how the first ending happened, where Kerr Smith's character dies from this crazy Rube Goldberg death. So rather than lightening it, we added more deaths. And by the time the fifth Final Destination, everybody basically dies, in these movies. So that's how that came about. Well, I came up with that I was thinking about, these kids who have survived, they seem to have been skipped. Death has seemingly having skipped them. And then they went, the thing was Flight 180. They were going to go to Paris. Then I just kind of thought about what would be a kind of I thought about what a big event would be to kill one of these kids. And, I just loved the idea of the 180 smashing. I just loved the idea of that smashing into Carter. And at first, when I talked about it, I go, well, there's a sign, right? There's a sign, and they were showing me like literally a sign, like in a restaurant where you walk up, and a sign hits them on the head or something. I go, no, there's got to be this giant fucking thing, And I remember Craig Perry telling Glenn, my partner and producer, saying, you better rein Wong in. He wants something that's giant, huge, and it's going to cost a lot of money. Ultimately, I think it cost us $1 million if we shoot the ending. But I knew it had to be big, and I love the idea of something that says 180 killing the character, and that's how we came up with the Moreau and Paris and all that stuff.
The ominous tone of Final Destination even infiltrated its soundtrack with the music of John Denver. John Denver, of course, died tragically in a plane crash. And this movie plays the song right before our hero gets on the plane. Why would anyone license this music to Final Destination when the movie was obviously referencing the dark demise of its author? Well,
I think they didn't pay attention to what it was that we were going to do. But afterwards, I think they were like, "What the fuck did we sign up for?" We got the rights, and then they saw the movie, I guess. So, but we didn't have a problem on the first movie because people didn't know what it was. Yeah, I think what we heard was that they regretted it afterwards because they didn't check closely enough about what the movie ultimately is all about. Final Destination was I think a surprise hit. And it stayed on, back then it was a big thing to be in the top 10 of films for more than 2 weeks, So that Final Destination has stayed on for like over the top 5 or something, over 7 weeks. I immediately jumped on the movie called The One with Jet Li, and we wanted to do, it was actually written for The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And then he ultimately went to do Scorpion King, and then we got Jet to do it. So they offered me the second one, and then I was busy doing the one, and then the third one came up, and Richard Brenner, who was an executive New Line at the time, said, I go, well, what's going to be the third one? Because they did two great, kind of inciting incidents. And he said, what roller coaster? And I thought, okay, I'm ready to do that. So that drew me in for the third one. We literally went to all amusement parks in the United States and no one would let us shoot in amusement park. So we couldn't shoot in the United States, and we went to Vancouver, and it was called the P&E. They had a small roller coaster in Vancouver that would let us shoot. It had 2 loop-de-loops, and that was it. So what we did was basically used that roller coaster to add sort of elements and loops to it. Then we had the actors dress in backwards clothing. So we reshot it so we could flip the film so that a roller coaster, the turns and the loops would go opposite of what the first ride, so we had double the roller coaster. And then we added CGI elements that enhanced the height of the ride. Then we added, like, we would do stuff with the cars themselves on green screen, and we drive past them really fast. So we added a bunch of, that roller coaster obviously does not exist. It was just a way of, we just added a whole bunch of different things to that one small roller coaster to make it work. In Final Destination 3, we just walked around Home Depot and go, oh my God, look at this! This place is a fucking disaster waiting to happen. There's so much stuff that could kill you in Home Depot. The pictures, it was sort of like, we got to start adding new elements. We can't just keep on doing the same thing over and over again. So that's how that came about. Sort of like, maybe we should add this kind of clues that our protagonists can start to figure out and the audience can go along. And then ultimately, you don't tell them exactly what's going to happen, but then when you look back on it, you go, oh my God, that happened. It was a clue. The death was given as a clue. So we went with that idea of adding these different elements to the movie so that, the audience is not seeing the same movie over and over again.
The most horrific scene in Final Destination 3 starts as a scene of pure exploitation of the human body, and then turns it into horrible, unwatchable body horror.
The third one, I remember one of the kind of most horrific or torturous kind of deaths was the tanning sequence, and not for the reasons why you think. I think just the idea, for me, shooting it and editing and all that, the idea of bare skin on super hot surfaces, that really creeped me out. Yeah, that's the thing I think most people, at first you go, oh, this is just kind of like a TNA thing. But I think that's what made it effective, is that at first you think, oh, it's a titillation, it's this, it's naked girls. But really, it's the idea of, it really, I think, digs into your brain about, if you ever touch a hot stove, you touch anything like that, it just hits you on a visceral level where you almost have a physical reaction to what you're seeing. It's sort of like a sense memory thing that I felt when I was watching it, when we're doing it, and then when we're editing it. It was probably the most disturbing deaths I could imagine because of the kind of sort of body torture, sensory torture that we put our characters through. And I love the idea that, people have this, you go into it like with this kind of like, ooh, sexy time, or, titillation, and it changes completely your idea of what it means and what it feels like. So that's one thing that I remember really I thought was effective, and also I was proud of, because I love that twisting of your expectations of that. The thing that was really, I think, hard, and the actresses didn't do that, but we had stunt women who we did the full burn on their body, and so the stunt coordinator showed us this gel, and this is, I guess they had just come up with some new formula for the stunt gel, and so the girl, the stunt woman who was nude as well, and we put this gel on, we lit her body on fire. That was a really, very stressful day, because there was nothing to hide. The fact that, if that gel didn't protect her skin, that was bad news. Now, obviously we had, people ready to put the fire out on that, but, that shot when we put it on fire, and then you get as much as you can, and then when the stunt woman taps out, that's when you put the fire out, and it just felt like forever, while she was on fire, and it was very stressful, that part of it, for sure, because she was naked, and her body was on fire. And then for the third one, we also did something that was quite interesting. New Line came to us and said, for the DVD release, that we have the technology for the audience who are watching DVD to choose their own adventure. And I was really into that. So there were, I think, 5 spots in the movie when you watch the DVD version of it that you could click on a different version. You can choose what the character would do, and then it would show you a different version of the scene, of the next death or whatever. So we did that. They gave us some money to redo, to do alternate versions of death, alternate sequences for the movie. So that was really fun. I thought also another thing that was fun to do. That was an added, kind of an addition, so that we can do something that's not just the same old thing for the movie. I'm telling you, that's what's so great about it, is that there are moments when you go, you see a logging truck in front of you, you go, holy shit, that's David Ellis's genius. But I'm going to step away from that. I'm going to move my car away from that, or speed up so I don't get behind it. I think it's fun about it, and I do think about that lots. I mean, I tend to be kind of detail oriented anyways in thinking about life and death. And I think, it's quirky. I mean, you never know when it's going to hit you. And that's kind of part of my persona in other things I've done, where I think about like the repercussions of, ordinary things. So it does hit me. Yeah. I mean, I do think about that kind of stuff. I mean, nothing super philosophical or anything. I mean, I guess if you want to talk in a kind of a fanciful way or philosophical way, that, death can come to you at any moment, and, live life to the fullest. On the other hand, I think the movies are just kind of a fun extra, it's just a fun way they're just fun, I think. I mean, I know death is not typically a fun topic, but I think the way we approached it was sort of like, well, this is not meant to be taken that seriously. They're fun ways for people to die, and is kind of clever, and enjoy it for what that is. I know some people probably would be aghast by me saying that, but movies are a release, and this is one way I think you can sort of step away from from everyday life, and it's to me, I see these as sort of like the fun version of horror and death, and not as psychologically damaging, I guess, as sort of torture porn movies.